Time now for Back Pages tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. Very pleased to say joining us tonight are the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein and ESPN's senior writer Mark Ogden. Welcome to you both, gents. So good to have you here. Let's quickly run through the back pages. All dominated by the Chelsea and England News. Daily Mail back page leads. Poch chewed up. Chelsea boss out after dinner with owner Bowley, left frustrated, a lack of power. And the Blues eye Ipswich's McKenna. They also have the image of Marcus Rashford with the words that Rashford axed for Euros. Plus an interesting story by Craig Hope, who reports that Dan Ashworth committed an own goal as he reveals United tapped him up. Back page of The Sun has an image of Pochettino and their headline is No More, spelled M-A-U-R. They also say McKenna is in the running and say Manchester United are on alert to swoop and replace Erik ten Hag. Front page of Telegraph Sport has the headline Pochettino leaves job at Chelsea and an image of Rashford. Southgate axes Rashford from Euro squad. Times back page. Pochettino leaves Chelsea. Argentinian departs after one season in a move that will put United on alert. And that's in the eye as well. I have the headline following the same story, Chelsea and England News, but also at the top, the story that Everton have put a price tag of £80 million on Jared Branthwaite. Well, let's start with the Chelsea news in the Mail. Poch chewed up. Chelsea boss out after dinner with owner Bowley. He felt frustrated at lack of power. Blues eye Ipswich's McKenna. David Ornstein, come to you first. Kieran Gill reporting there that there was a frustration from Pochettino, whereas Carve Solokol reporting our end that it was pretty amicable and that Pochettino wasn't worried about having not enough influence in transfers. What's your take on it?
I think this has been coming for a while, Teddy, and that may be a surprise to some, but those of us within the industry that have been privy to some of the information around Chelsea, it suggests that it wasn't entirely happy on either side, and that's why there was going to be this end of season review a year into a 2-year contract that had an option to extend by 12 months. And despite results picking up, which did make it a more interesting conversation and perhaps slightly less predictable outcome, I think the direction of travel has been clear. And so if the club and the ownership and the sporting directors weren't seeing what they liked from Mauricio Pochettino, and by the looks of it, Mauricio Pochettino didn't necessarily like everything that he was seeing from them, then this is probably the best way to go. And it means Chelsea have another managerial change under the new ownership, and the new ownership will be desperate to bring some consistency now, some stability, a long-term man in the hot seat, which they've said before, but they'll hope it's delivered with a clear style of play and identity and improve the injury situation and continue to recruit some of these great players. And I'm sure when they went into the Pochettino relationship, they would have seen him as being the long-term solution. But for a variety of reasons, it just hasn't worked out. And it leaves us in a fairly extraordinary situation. I think they'll be looking to make an appointment in days rather than weeks, is the word that's coming out from Stamford Bridge tonight. So it's a case of watch this space.
Interesting times. We'll get to successes in just a second, Mark. Let's consider the back page of The Sun. No More. M-A-U-R again, the spelling. Chaos at Blues with McKenna in the running. Man United on alert to swoop and replace Erik ten Hag. Mark, if we said that Chelsea was sixth at the start of the season, could you perhaps understand it? But given the sense of momentum, is it slightly perplexing? Is this a dangerous move from Chelsea?
A little bit. Look, I mean, this will be the fifth managerial appointment or the managerial change at Chelsea since the new owners came in less than 2 years ago. So you have to say, when Mauricio Pochettino came in last summer, Chelsea had finished 12th, I think, bottom half of the table, bought loads of players, and the squad needed to settle down. It was an imbalanced squad. It was a squad that needed a lot of time to kind of get in the right shape. And I think Pochettino overall has done that. I think, obviously, during the mid part of the season, he was really struggling, and they probably could have moved him on then, even after such a short space of time. But he's certainly turned things around in recent weeks. Obviously, the 5-0 defeat at Arsenal didn't help, but he's gone to a cup final, finished sixth, got him into Europe. You could really see some kind of pattern emerging at Chelsea, a bit of stability coming into play. Obviously, Cole Palmer's had a great season. I think Malo Gusto's had a good season as well. You just got the sense that a summer this year with maybe a couple of experienced players coming in, would have helped Chelsea kick on to maybe even challenge for the title next year. But this is where the divergence comes, because the Chelsea owners want a different approach. They want, as we know, they want to bring in younger players. I think they just agreed to sign a player from Brazil this week for a 17-year-old. So that's where they want to go, young players. This team, this squad needs a couple more experienced players just to kind of help guide the young players along. And that's what Pochettino was probably looking for, to bridge the gap. And it meant that they were on two different paths. And if the owners and the managers are on different paths, it's not going to work, despite the fact he's got a great pedigree. Now, the problem that Chelsea have got right now is that this job will appeal to lots of up-and-coming coaches. It really will. You know, there's so many coaches out there that will take Chelsea, despite the issues at play. But I don't see a manager coming in with the control that he would need to take the club to where they want to be. And that's the problem. It's almost like a catch-22. Chelsea want to go to a certain place, but they're not letting the manager do the job that he needs to do. So you have to wonder what the aspirations of Chelsea's owners are. If they don't think that Mauricio Pochettino's had a good season, getting them to sixth, they were never going to finish higher than sixth. They've definitely overachieved by finishing sixth. It makes you wonder what sort of club they are, what sort of team they are, what are their aspirations, because you have to give the manager time and space to develop a team, to develop players, to move players that aren't good enough, and to make the players that are there better. And he's just started doing that, and he's on the way out.
Alan Smith reporting in the Star. Out, David, Chelsea parting with Poch. What's your read on how attractive it would be for a prospective manager, David? In a sense, Mark's obviously saying that perhaps it will deter other managers, but could Chelsea's form and the young players be an attractive prospect too, the recent months?
Yeah, absolutely. Chelsea's an attractive proposition. People are saying Manchester United is a club that prospective managers won't want to join. I don't believe that at all. And in the case of Chelsea, the ownership, although it has been a bit of a tumultuous start, they've clearly got great ambition to bring Chelsea back to the level of competing for the biggest trophies. They want to be back in the Champions League and vying for that honour, as well as the Premier League and the domestic cups. They're building a squad of young and talented players that they believe will be befitting that level. And Mark sort of touched upon it there. It's all about the structure for these new owners, and they want the head coach to fit into that and be on the same page as them, and very close to the sporting directors, Lawrence Stewart and Paul Winstanley, and the ownership in Clearlake Capital and Todd Bowley's group. And it's not too dissimilar to what we're seeing at somewhere like Liverpool, with these sort of technical directors and sporting directors and people building a model that just sees the head coach slot in. And I think there'll be many looking at it and saying, we can take it on. Even in the Abramovich era, which was hire and fire, they were never short of candidates to step into the role. And we're seeing tonight names like Kieran McKenna of Ipswich being linked, Thomas Frank of Brentford, Sebastian Hoeneß of Stuttgart. And, whether or not they end up, being dead in the frame, there will be plenty of managers, coaches who see this as a brilliant opportunity with a very talented squad, an ownership that's going to continue to invest and believe that they can be the person to get this right. I'm sure someone will eventually, whether or not it happens for the next person in. That's something we'll have to wait and see on.
Indeed, Chelsea's still attractive. Then David says, Mark, what about Pochettino? Is he attractive for his prospective clubs? Interesting piece, Jason Burt and Matt Law writing in The Telegraph. Jason Burt saying that stock has risen, United or Bayern could cash in. Do you think that in some ways this season has reflected well on Pochettino, and in a way, the way it's ended as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think he did have a very difficult job, and as I said earlier on, he had a really difficult patch during mid-season, and he could have lost his job then, but he did turn it around. So I think, let's be honest, Mauricio Pochettino is a manager with a good reputation, but he hasn't won a trophy in English football. He's been close a couple of times, but, he's come close with Tottenham. Is he a nearly man? Who knows? I mean, he's certainly got a charisma about him, and he can find a player, but has he got that extra quality to take a team from being potential winners to winners? So I guess the biggest clubs will wonder about that, but at the outset, there's not a lot of coaches out at the moment that are convincing the big clubs. Bayern Munich are still struggling to find a coach. Man United may need a new coach in the next few weeks if Erik ten Hag doesn't survive. So, Pochettino was on a two-man shortlist in the end with Erik ten Hag at United and missed out for a different reason, for a variety of reasons. But I guess now that he's available, it does shake up the transfer market for managers this summer, because, Bayern will look at the guy and think, well, he's managed PSG, he's managed a big club. Barcelona may become available soon as well, because Xavi his situation seems to be under threat as well. Now, obviously, I know that Poch played for Espanyol. He said in the past he wouldn't manage Barcelona. Maybe he might do if it came along. So, he's an attractive proposition because he's managed big clubs and managed big players. But his reputation isn't what it was 5 years ago when he was at Tottenham. So I guess he has rebuilt his reputation a bit, but I guess he's still got to convince everybody that he can be an absolute elite manager and win the Premier League, win the Champions League. But, maybe he was never going to do that at Chelsea because of the situation he was in.
David, let's wrap up quickly by asking a two-part question to you. Where you see Pochettino ended up and where you potentially see Chelsea going next. The Times headline, Pochettino leaves Chelsea, Argentinian departs after one season, a move that will put United on alert. Any chance that Pochettino swiftly replaces Ten Hag and wins the FA Cup and denies Chelsea a Europa League spot?
You give me all the easy questions. I think Manchester United have been heavily linked with him for some time before Ten Hag, like Mark says. He met with Ineos about the Nice job too, so there's a relationship there. And I'm sure that, now he's available, he will be in the thinking of clubs like Manchester United. And I'm sure, given the background, a club like Manchester United will hold some appeal to him. I'm not suggesting that it's going to happen. We'll have to wait and see what happens on Erik Ten Hag, of course. But clearly it's one to watch because they're the sort of club, and sorry, we've got phones ringing about this story as we speak, the nature of this industry. So, that's inevitably one you've got to watch, but you've got to think about, the structure of a club like Manchester United under Ineos. If it didn't quite work for Mauricio Pochettino at Chelsea, where they want to bring in set-piece coaches, and he was said to be against that and a more traditional style of management, would it work at somewhere like Manchester United, where they're trying to do something similar with their sporting directors and so on? Maybe he'll take a break. He was out of the game for quite a long time after leaving PSG and before joining Chelsea. Opportunities came and went, and he'll like to see himself at that top echelon. And he'll have to make this decision very carefully. In terms of Chelsea, it seems that, they're going to go for one of these newer breed of exciting managers that play a good style of football, an identity. They fit into their structure. They connect with the fan base. They've got a good record of keeping players fit and available and improving players. We've seen similar criteria when Liverpool appointed Arne Slot. So, I think we'll know pretty soon on Chelsea, but I'm not sure we'll know so soon on Pochettino's future.
No, OK, thank you for now. David, quick word, Mark, on the piece in the Mail before we hit a commercial break. Ashworth own goal as he reveals United tapped him up. This is by Craig Hope, the Mail's North East reporter. What do you make of that story?
Well, I'm not surprised. Football at times projects itself as an industry where everything is done in a certain way, but football is no different to any other industry where people are moving around positions and moving around jobs. They get asked if they want to take a job somewhere else. We're not saying he's been tapped up. That's a kind of a loaded phrase. But I think, Dan Ashworth knew about Man United's interest. I'm sure Newcastle knew about Man United's interest. So this situation needs to be resolved now for everybody's best interest. United for Newcastle, but Dan Ashworth is dragged on for a long time. But I don't think anybody's really surprised at what is being suggested because it's the real world. Football has to accept it's part of the real world in terms of business these days.
You're watching Back Pages tonight. Welcome back to you, and it's welcome back to the Athletics football correspondent David Ornstein and ESPN's senior writer Mark Ogden. Let's go to the Telegraph regarding England's provisional squad for the Euros. And Mark, Southgate busts the myth. His soft touch with ruthless calls. Henderson and Rashford pictured, of course, omitted from that squad. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, I must admit, I think there's been a bit of a misconception about Gareth Southgate. I think he's always had a ruthless streak right from the outset of his time in charge of England. I think he got rid of Theo Walcott quite quickly, Wayne Rooney after that, Joe Hart. He has made the big calls when he's had to make them. I think the issue with Gareth Southgate is that does he make the big calls during games in tournaments when you have to be quick thinking and change your tactics quickly to win a game and maybe I've lost a bit of control. But in terms of selection of players, he's never been shy of dropping big name players. And on this occasion, he's done it twice with Jordan Henderson and Marcus Rashford. And you have to say on both occasions, really, he's got it right. I don't think either player can say hand on heart that they deserve to be in the England squad. And, they're both out for different reasons. I think Jordan Henderson has had a bad season in Saudi Arabia than in the Netherlands with Ajax. He's been injured recently, so that's really kind of knocked him sideways, as Gareth Southgate said, that injury, that hamstring injury, just basically cost him his place. But I don't think he's probably earned it over the year playing for Al Ettifaq and for Ajax. So that is understandable. Marcus Rashford, again, he scored 8 goals all season for Man United. He's had a terrible season. He did score for England against Italy back in November, and it looked like that playing for England was a bit of a release for him, that it kind of, getting away from the situation at Man United. But I don't think you can justify picking Marcus Rashford and the form that he's in. Saying that, Gareth's picked I think he's picked 12 forwards in his squad. If he can't be among the best 12 forwards in English football right now, that is an indictment of Marcus Rashford. He's 26, he should be at his peak. He was at one point, almost like the golden boy of English football, but he's just kind of tailed off in the last year and a half. So, maybe he needs a change, maybe he needs a break, maybe he needs the summer off, maybe it'll do him good for Man United or his own career. But I don't think either player can say they should be in the squad, and I think Gareth Southgate has made the right decision on the big calls.
David, what's your take? Rashford acts for Euros is the Daily Mail back page. A lot of people saying that he's a point of difference, should have been included. Some wonderful forwards there, but a lot of tens in there for England. Is his pace something that maybe Southgate could have relied on in the Euros, even as a sub?
Yeah, this was definitely a surprise, Teddy, because you only need to cast your mind back to the World Cup when Marcus Rashford was in the midst of a really good season at Man United. And he didn't actually play as much as I thought, having been out there in Doha. He should have. He made an impact when he played, few goals in the group stages, even though he was largely used off the bench. Then I was really shocked that he didn't start the first knockout stage. Was it against Senegal? And then obviously the defeat against France. He was in the most recent squad in March. And the presumption, despite his form, was that he's the kind of threat and at his stage and age in his career that would be useful in this tournament. And we know he strikes fear into opponents when he's on form and confident. We know he's well liked on the continent by many of the leading clubs and has been for a long time. So, yeah, this was one, of course, there was uncertainty over him, but I did think Gareth Southgate would go with him. On the other hand, I wasn't so surprised with Henderson, just because of what Mark's explained around the injuries and the form and a very disjointed year in terms of his two moves since leaving Liverpool. I think he'll be really bitterly disappointed. And the surprise element is that Southgate has let go such a loyal player, somebody he has relied on and trusted and is great in the dressing room, a top character, a leader. He was vice captain, been to 6 major tournaments, and he's going brave, Gareth Southgate. He's backing the likes of Adam Wharton, Kobbie Mainoo to come good. If this is to be his last major tournament as England manager, it looks like he's going to go down by doing what the country want and being a bit bold in his selections. Should Rashford leave, Mark, quickly?
Well, he's got to find somewhere to go. And I think that's the issue right now, that the transfer market this summer is not awash with money, as David will know. There's not many clubs out there that could afford Marcus Rashford. And the one that is constantly suggested as being the one that would take him, PSG, I've been told that they're looking at other people, Rafael Leao, AC Milan. I don't think Rashford is on their list. So he might be stuck with Man United and Man United might be stuck with him. So if that's the case, they've got to make it work together and got to find a way out of the situation that he's in.
Feels like, David, you mentioned that the players, a little bit of a top-heavy squad as well. Of the youngsters in there, who do you think might have a realistic chance of not only being on the plane to Germany, but also perhaps in the starting 11? People have mentioned Jarrad Branthwaite, left-footed centre-half, particularly as England are struggling to find a left-footed left-back, or a fit one at least.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that Branthwaite will get a start unless there are injuries which dictate it. But I do think he will be a part of the England setup for years to come. I love what I've seen of him so far. But I think in the last international break that he was called up for, he didn't feature. And so it would be a bit of a surprise if he came in ahead of the likes of Mark Gehi, who I think has a really good chance of starting. Let's see what the fitness state is of Harry Maguire, because obviously Gareth Southgate's reluctant to break the central defensive partnership of Maguire and Stones. Wharton, I would love to see go. Everything we've witnessed with him since that brilliant move to Crystal Palace, Dougie Freedman, the Scot helping out England, is really impressive. And it's in a part of midfield where England don't have much depth without Henderson there. Kobbie Mainoo too looks like he's going to get an opportunity. So, yeah, I think those two midfielders, I would say, are those that I would imagine will get more of a chance than Branthwaite at this stage, but you never know with the injuries, and that's the big factor that Gareth Southgate will be sweating on.
Indeed, Mark. Rashford and Henderson left out of England Euro squad. The Times headline. Gareth Southgate also saying that Harry Kane should be fit, recovered from that back problem. Do you envisage Watkins and Toney both going, or could Southgate be imaginative and end up with a false 9 if Kane is forced to play or forced to withdraw? What do you see the situation with the forwards? Because there are a lot of them, as David says.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if Watkins and Tony went. I think that would be overdoing it in terms of the player that they can bring to the table. I think Anthony Gordon's one that I think should go. I think he's the one that would maybe come in for Marcus Rashford, the pacey outlet on the wing that can come inside and can score goals. And I just don't know. I just don't think it's Southgate's style to take two very similar players, especially with defensive problems. If he's got 26 players to pick, I think he would look at decent cover at the back, because he has got a lot of injuries at the back end of the team, and that is a concern because, if Maguire or if Declan Rice was to go missing, there's not a lot of cover. So I think he needs to stock up with midfielders and defenders and hope for the best. Goalkeeper's a situation as well, because he's got Jordan Pickford as selected, obviously, but beyond that, Aaron Ramsdale hasn't played very often this season. Dean Henderson's and James Trafford hasn't been playing for Burnley, so that could be a problem as well.
Absolutely. Quick word on Luke Shaw, Mark, before we get to David in about 15 seconds. How realistic that he plays at the Euros?
I think it's really unlikely, but I can see why he's been selected in this squad, because they haven't got a left back, and they're going to give him as much time as possible. But he's had injuries. When he comes back from injuries, Luke Shaw, it takes a while to get fully fit. So I think he's really, really unlikely to go unless it's a real injury crisis.
OK, we'll see Kieran Trippier favourite to start at left back, perhaps in Shaw's absence. David, before you go, you across all the transfers. Ederson out of Man City, the Mirror to quit club. I think it's a little bit provocative, the headline. It seems to suggest only if a big offer came in about 25 seconds. What do you make of that story?
Well, it would be a massive departure from Manchester City. With some of these things, there's no smoke without fire, and so perhaps there is a bit of genuine uncertainty. There's interest, it's said, from Saudi Arabia, and it would be a seismic departure. Obviously, City have got one of the best backup goalkeepers in world football, but they would need to look for a new number one. So yeah, that's one of many interesting transfers as the summer goes on. I forgot to mention a young player who I'm surprised didn't make the cut, and that's Harvey Elliott. He's been amazing for Liverpool, and he will be feeling a bit hard done by.
David, Mark, have to jump in. Thank you very much for being on Back Pages tonight. It's available as a podcast.